the part of what I do that interests me the most, and I always find challenging yet enjoyable, is kind of being that, like, the way I look at it is there's the client side and then there's our dev team side, and what the client says comes to me and what I need to tell the dev team goes to them. And I am kind of like the interpreter for both sides.
Yeah.
So when the dev team comes back to me and says, this is how this works, I've got to take that and put it into words that the customer is going to understand.
Oh,
Because mostly the dev team is going to be very technical. And when you throw something technical at a customer, their eyes glaze over, or they don't know what to ask. And so I like to make sure that I'm trying to translate it in a way that is beneficial for the customer. And it's funny because when I can take that explanation, go back to the dev team with it, they're just like, that's not what I said. And I'm like, no, but it's what you meant. Like, but this is how this person's going to understand it. So I may have left out, this much of the explanation. It's because they didn't need to know that. That's all kind of behind the scenes, and the customer just really cares about like what they see and what they're going to be impacted by.
I'm glad I'm already recording because I was gonna try and make it like just this one shot, but through the magic of editing, I want to put that in there
Okay.
because that's exactly what um, uh, I think. Well, the kind of thing that I people will find fascinating, that I find fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Let me absolutely ruin the flow and just get you to introduce yourself and tell us what team you're on and where you're at, if you wouldn't mind doing that, please.
Sure, no problem. So my name is Tammy Fingus. I'm the only Tammy at IQ so far. Um, this is my 20th year with IQ, actually. November will be 20 years for me. So that's an achievement I'm looking forward to. I joined the payments team. Actually, I was just trying to figure this out yesterday. I think it was 2009. And so I'm been with them for a long time. I started out doing kind of second tier support with the anticipation of going into development. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. I ended up having another baby, so I was off for a year. When I came back, there just was a need for that customer interaction. So someone that can like work with clients for pilots, work with clients for designing out features that they're asking. And really, since then, that's kind of been my role, and I've just sort of continued on from then, and taken in different flavors of it. For example, in the last few years, we've added a what we call it payment services gateway. Um, and it is an API integration essentially. So that's been a different experience in terms of there's no UI for the customer to interact with, but they're developers interacting with our services. So that's been a different experience for me and for the team. So
Well, thank you. I didn't know that you had or have a development background. At one point, you had an intention of being full-fledged developer.
yep. So when I started, I'm part of the Work Wireless crew, and when I started with Work Wireless, I was the second developer on that in that company.
Oh wow.
And so I developed for years. I was with them. Mat leave, came back after a year, and then I moved into, even at that time, it was a kind of a design type role, but way more technical focused. Work Wireless at the time outsourced a lot of their work to India. And so I would create documents that the team in India would then consume while we were sleeping. And then in the morning, we'd have a call with India and kind of go through everything and work through any issues that came up. Yeah, so then it kind of from there moved. I think I went kind of QA a little bit, and then had another baby, and then that's when IQ acquired Work Wireless when I came back from my second mat leave. So
And so a lot of your career has been at Icometrics has been uh, we have this very rapid transition from the very technical things we do to the point where a layman business person needs to be able to use it and interact with us, and you're helping us in uh, that transition.
yeah,
You
kind of
described it
bridging that gap. Yeah.
as the interpreter in that. role.
Yeah.
Uh, I can. How did? When did you discover? How did you discover that that was such a needed thing, a valuable thing?
Um, I would say it was a lot of the time, you'd develop something, you'd get it in front of the client once it was done, and then the client's like, well, that's not how I need to use it. Or they would be like, this works, but it's really slow. And so then, when you got talking with the client at that point, you'd understand, oh, like they need to load thousands of these records into this little wee screen that we built. So it was just kind of just really saw that there was an opportunity there to help prevent like kind of like the reiterating over things happening at the end of the project instead of earlier on in the project.
Right. So I won't be able to say the exact cartoon, but there's plenty of cartoons that say what the client says they want, what the developer makes, and then what the client actually needs and stuff.
Yeah.
Do, do you have tricks to hear and see and figure out? Like you're talking about not revisiting it after, which seems like, boy, if we can save that time, that's always good.
Yeah.
What do we have to do to not go down that path where we so misinterpret each other?
One thing that I have really found is, for the most part, clients are very visual. So one of the more recent examples I've had is I was working with a client on reporting. So we had delivered this function to them. The reporting that they were getting, they came back to us and they said, we're missing this, we need this, this is how we need this to look. And it was just this wall of text of things that they needed or wasn't working for them. And we got feedback from two different clients. And for the most part, it was pretty aligned. But obviously, people just explain things in using different words. So it was like, okay, how do I get to make sure we're doing one thing that satisfies two clients? And so what I did was created mocks basically of the report, and I gave different layouts of it. And with that, I said, so if we went with layout one, this enables you to do this, this, and this. If we go with layout two, you won't be able to do this, but how do you plan on using this? So as a report in an Excel file, do you filter the data? Do you sort it? Because if you sort it, then this layout's not going to work for you. And I found that really kind of brought everyone to the same place. And because you're looking at what would be the finished product, it was really easy to come to, okay, this is what we need to do in the end.
Uh, Tammy, that's a brilliant example of something we experience all the time in a lot of different places. I just want to point out, you probably see this, but we say things like we need to increase communication. But if we were to actually do like a mock of what it looks like, we'd
Mm-hmm.
say, do you want to hear information like this? Do you want to hear information like this? Do you want to be blasted every morning? It would be a whole new conversation if we actually just saw what it would actually, the instance of it would look like.
Yeah,
And it
some
sounds
kind of
like what you're
prototype.
doing.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry,
And
go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, and like, and then when you have, as someone that's helping to design this for the customer, when you have outstanding questions, um, I find that again, it's using the mock or the prototype is really easy to explain clearly what you're doing. So, like if I had this layout and I'm like, this will work really well for them if they don't sort the records, because as soon as they sort, then everything's going to be out of sync. So then I can like kind of ask them that question and show them exactly what will happen if they sort, and then I can get a really clear answer on whether that's necessary or not.
So when you say mock, I, um, you're not necessarily, or maybe you are. Are you a visual designer?
No,
You're
not at all.
or you're a you're a functional designer. You functionally design
I would say
what
I'm more on the functional side, but definitely if there is more UI components, I'll engage with a designer to help me kind of
I
mock out those
see.
things. Yeah.
I see.
You don't want to make it look too pretty. So that's where I'm really good at not making it look too pretty. Because then if it's too pretty, the client's like, oh, this is done already. And no, no, it's not done. This
Ah,
is just a picture of it. So if you make it kind of ugly, and then they're like, oh, I don't want that. So
very clever.
yeah.
Uh, um, I think people might watch this and they might say, "Oh, there's things that I'm interested in. How do I look more into doing stuff like this?" Or I don't know, maybe somebody trying to look at IQ metrics and say from the outside and saying what kind of roles are there. Um, does your activity have an official industry understood title?
Hmm. That's that's a good question.
So no.
I would say like my title right now is product manager. I feel I do a lot more product owner, which is when you define using like Scrum and Agile. That really talks about prioritizing the backlog for the dev teams and making sure they're executing well during a sprint. They're finishing items on time within the sprint time period. But I really do both. Like I'm also business analyst in a sense because you're looking at what the customer needs, you're translating that into requirements and putting that in front of the dev team. So I always have felt that IQ kind of there's this role, and it's maybe a product manager. That's more of a newer term to IQ metrics. It is a product owner and it's a business analyst. So I guess whatever we want to call those three things, I feel that's what this role is. So
Good. Thank you. It's a bit of an unfair position. I hate when people ask me to say what a title is too.
yeah.
I have a delicate converse question, which is the way you have to anticipate and interact with clients to make sure that what they're saying is makes sense. Do you have to do the same thing with developers, like to make
Oh yeah.
the transition to speak with them? And do you have the same sort of challenges of don't make it too pretty, or they'll just say, "Hey, that's good enough. We'll just do exactly that."
Uh, I've found for the most part, developers really take what you have at face value. So if you say make it look like this, they'll do that. In some like, if there's a case where I'm like, it could, you know, could be for like if we are designing a UI, for example, I'll look to the front end developers and say like, give me some ideas, like kind of give me a few ideas on what this could look like, as long as the functions are there that this is what we're doing. But by all means, you use your imagination to add in any animations, how you want it to look, how you want it to function. I really depend on them for some of that direction. But yeah, I don't know what's easier, to be honest, working with the customer or working with the developers. Sometimes it goes both ways, I guess. So
I I just want to point out that you just like totally made my synapses start firing when you talked about how you open up creative windows for developers. Like the really naive, simple definition I have for developers is writing a ticket and they just meet those requirements. But you opening a window for creativity for them, I think is super cool.
yeah, I don't ever want to tell someone how you do your work. I just want you to meet these requirements. So if performance is a concern, a consideration, then you need to make sure you're not building something that's really slow. I mean, performance is generally always a concern, so that's something they should be looking at. But yeah, when it comes to anything that a developer knows more about than me, I want them to tell me how they think it should be done. And if they have a few ideas, work with the dev team to figure out what the best option is. You don't need to make that decision on your own if you're not comfortable doing that. But as long as the business needs are being met, I leave the rest to them to figure out how to do. So
That's fantastic. I have I missed any questions or you have any thoughts that uh, you want to share with people that are watching this and understanding your role a little bit? Have I just missed a big bulk chunk of your day that we haven't talked about?
uh, I don't think so. For the most part, like um, yeah, I think that is sort of like my core accountabilities with this role is figuring out those requirements from the customer, putting them in front of the dev team to consume in a way that they understand, and then working with the dev team to make sure that those needs are met. Probably, I guess another part of it would be like once we've delivered that, now whether it's within say we have a project that's going to last 6 weeks. After 2 weeks, I might take what's been done, go back to the customer and show them and say, what do you think so far? Like this part's not working, but this is what this is going to look like. Tell me, give me feedback, tell me what you think. And so then I'll work with them on that, and then go back to the dev team and say, so this is the feedback. What do you guys think of this? What can we do here? Does this really make sense? But a lot of the time, I try to decide with the customer before I go to the dev team. I don't think you really need that, but I know what you're trying to do, and you can do it this way. So
Uh, you know, that just actually manifests what I understand to be sort of an agile tenet or methodology is that you move or you produce stuff quickly so that you can get quick feedback and you can keep iterating on it. It sounds like that's actually where it happens.
yeah, we try to do that. I mean, I think there's definitely room for improvement. A lot of the time, we could do better with that. Sometimes it's a decision of like, I know this client doesn't really know what they want yet, so let's just get a basic something out there and
Mm.
then get their feedback. So there might be a little bit of rework, but sometimes that's the best way to get the feedback that you need. So kind of depends on how engaged the customer is. So
That's awesome. I I I want to end it there just so it's a nice manageable time length.
sure.
But this is fascinating. Thank you very much, and thanks for what you do and bridging that space between client and developer. It's like so clearly uh, an essential piece of making this run smoothly and working. So,
Yeah, I think it definitely has its benefits. And if there's are any teams out there that aren't doing that, I would highly recommend they try it because it can appear to slow things down, but if you take a look at how much rework you do by not discussing this kind of thing up front, you probably aren't ahead of the game. So taking a bit more time to design it out and build out those actual requirements, you gain in the long run. So
what a perfect message to end this. Thank you very much,
no
Tammy.
problem. Yep. Thanks,
All right,
Nevin.
thank you.
We'll see ya.